Revenge Office Stories. My boss stood on stage, a smug smile on her face, about to accept the Innovator of the Year award for a project she stole directly from me. The whole company was watching, either in the auditorium or on the live stream, ready to applaud her so-called genius. She had no clue that in my hand, I was holding a simple, standard-issue USB drive, a little piece of plastic that held the evidence that would not only expose her as a fraud, but detonate her career in the most public way possible. For years, she had tried to ruin me with a death by 1,000 cuts campaign of disrespect, thinking I wouldn't fight back. She was dead wrong. This is the story of how I stopped being her victim and started orchestrating her spectacular downfall. It all started, like these things often do, with a ton of hope and excitement. I was 27, just hired as a senior data analyst at a fast-growing tech firm called Viridian Dynamics. It was a huge step up for me. The company was known for being on the cutting edge, a place where smart people got the resources to do great things. And leading my team was Eleanor Vance. On the surface, Eleanor was everything you'd want in a boss. She was charismatic, always impeccably dressed, and had this disarming smile that made you feel like you were the most important person in the room. She was the classic girl boss, praised in company-wide emails for her ambition. During my first few weeks, she couldn't have been more encouraging. "Alex," she'd say, her voice full of warmth, "your insights are exactly what this team has been missing. I see big things for you here." I was thrilled. I felt seen. I thought I'd finally found a place where my skills would be valued. But that honeymoon phase? It was brutally short. The first cracks started to show in small ways you could almost miss. It began in our team meetings. I'd present a new data model I'd been working on, and Eleanor would listen intently, nodding, before saying something like, "That's an interesting starting point, Alex." A little rough, but a good first effort. Then, a week later, in a big meeting with other department heads, I'd hear her present my exact idea, just polished up with some corporate buzzwords, and introduce it as a new strategic framework I've been developing. The first time it happened, I was just confused. I figured it had to be a misunderstanding. I was young and conditioned to give my boss the benefit of the doubt. But then it happened again, and again. It became her thing. I'd propose a solution. She'd shoot it down in front of the team, only to champion it as her own when the right people were in the room. She was a master of what I now call idea laundering. She'd take my raw concepts, repackage them, and sell them upstairs as her own brilliant thoughts. My name was systematically erased, and my voice was gradually silenced. It was so subtle that complaining would have made me sound paranoid. How do you prove someone stole a thought? The microaggressions got worse. She'd give me backhanded compliments designed to undermine my confidence. "Nice job on that quarterly report, Alex," she'd say in a team huddle. "It's amazing you got it done with your, limited experience in this sector." The praise was just a container for the insult inside. She was painting me as a junior employee who needed her constant guidance, when I was the one doing the heavy lifting for our entire team's output. Her favorite phrase, the one that really showed how arrogant she was about the complex reporting systems I'd built from scratch. These weren't just spreadsheets. They were intricate dashboards that integrated data from a dozen sources, automated with complex macros I'd spent hundreds of hours on. They were the engine of our department. One afternoon, after I'd just pulled a 70-hour week to launch a new reporting suite, she glanced at my screen, sniffed, and said with a wave of her hand, "Oh, this? It's cute you find it so complicated. Honestly, Alex, I could run these reports in my sleep." That sentence just hung in the air. It was more than an insult. It was a total devaluation of my skill and my dedication. She wasn't just taking my credit. She was saying my work was so trivial she could do it unconsciously. In her eyes, my expertise was a joke. It was right then that any respect I had for her completely evaporated. I wasn't just dealing with a difficult boss. I was dealing with a toxic, narcissistic saboteur who saw me as a threat to be neutralized. The warm, encouraging boss from my first few weeks was gone, replaced by the chilling realization that my career was in the hands of someone who would happily destroy it to get ahead. For almost 2 years, I just took it. I told myself this was just corporate life, to keep my head down and do good work. I was wrong. The final straw, the thing that pushed me from quiet suffering into a state of cold, calculated rage, was a project codenamed Project Nightingale. Project Nightingale was my baby. It was the most ambitious thing I'd ever done, a predictive analytics model designed to forecast market trends with an accuracy our company had never seen. It was a potential game changer. For 6 months, I lived and breathed Nightingale. I worked weekends and pulled all-nighters, pouring every ounce of my skill into it. Eleanor, meanwhile, stayed completely hands-off. She'd ask for high-level updates, which meant she wanted a one-page summary she could forward to her bosses without understanding any of it. "Just keep me in the loop, Alex," she'd say, "but don't bog me down with the technical weeds." I was grateful for the freedom, stupidly thinking it was a sign of trust. It was actually a sign she didn't care about the work, only the credit. As Nightingale neared completion, the buzz around it grew. The early results were incredible, and whispers reached the top executives. The board scheduled a special review. This was my chance to finally showcase my work on a major stage. I spent a week putting together a detailed presentation, getting every slide perfect. The day before the presentation, Eleanor called me into her office, that sickly sweet smile on her face. "Alex, great news," she said. "The board is so excited about Nightingale they want me to give them a private pre-briefing this afternoon. Just a quick, informal walkthrough. No need for you to be there. I don't want to waste your time with executive stuff. You just focus on polishing things for the official launch." A cold knot formed in my stomach. "I really think I should be there, Eleanor," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I can walk them through the methodology. Some of it is really complex." She waved her hand dismissively. "Don't be silly. I've got this. I know Nightingale inside and out. You just make sure it's perfect for the big show." I had a choice. I could demand to be in the room and get labeled as difficult, or I could trust her one last time. I trusted her. It was the biggest mistake of my career. The next morning, I walked into a weird vibe at the office. People were avoiding eye contact. My friend Sarah from marketing pulled me aside, a pitying look on her face. "Alex, I am so sorry," she whispered. "My director was in the board meeting yesterday. He told me everything." My blood ran cold. "What happened?" "Eleanor presented Nightingale," Sarah said, her voice low. "She presented it like it was all hers. She never said your name. Not once. But that wasn't even the worst part. The thing is, Alex, she totally bombed it. The CEO started asking specific questions about the data and the algorithm, and she just fell apart. She couldn't answer anything. She just kept repeating buzzwords like synergy and disruption. It was a train wreck. I felt the floor drop out from under me. She hadn't just stolen my work. She had butchered it. She took my masterpiece and presented it like a piece of finger painting because she was too arrogant to admit she didn't understand it. Sarah continued. She tried to save face. She told them she'd been so hands-on with the strategy that she'd left the minor technical details to her team. She promised them a full, flawless demonstration at the upcoming Innovator of the Year showcase. And that's when it all clicked. It wasn't just the theft. It was the humiliation. She would rather publicly fail and tarnish the project than share an ounce of credit. She was going to use the Innovator of the Year showcase as her comeback on the company's biggest stage. And I knew she expected me to silently clean up her mess and hand her a polished win. That's when I knew I had to do something. The quiet analyst was gone. In her place was someone who had just been handed a declaration of war. Eleanor hadn't just tried to sabotage a project. She had tried to sabotage me, and I was done letting her get away with it. That evening, I didn't go home and scream. I didn't cry. I sat at my desk in the empty office, and I started a plan. My anger had cooled and sharpened into a single point of focus. Eleanor saw me as a quiet workhorse she could exploit. She never imagined I'd fight back. My revenge wouldn't be a shouting match or a dramatic email to HR. That was her style, messy and unprofessional. My revenge would be like the systems I'd built, intricate, precise, and flawlessly executed. It would be a trap of her own making. I'd been casually saving odd emails for a while, but now it became an obsession. I created a secret, encrypted folder on a personal drive, codenamed Project Karma. Every night I spent an hour archiving evidence. I saved every email with her conflicting instructions. I screenshotted every Slack message where she took credit for my ideas. I created a detailed log, a digital diary of her toxicity, complete with dates, times, and witnesses. The email where she told me to ignore a critical data stream, then later blamed me for the error? Saved. The chat where she called my initial Nightingale proposal uninspired, then presented it to a client 2 days later? Screenshot. I was building an unshakable fortress of facts. This wasn't just for revenge, it was an insurance policy. A week later, just as Sarah predicted, the company-wide email went out announcing the annual Innovator of the Year award. It specifically mentioned that projects with high strategic impact, like Nightingale, were prime candidates. 2 hours later, an email from Eleanor hit my inbox. Alex, it read, I've decided to officially nominate Project Nightingale for the Innovator Award. I've listed myself as the project lead, as is appropriate. Your role as primary analyst will be noted in the submission. This is a huge opportunity for the team. My heart pounded, but my face was a mask. The bait was set. Her ego was so massive, she couldn't resist. She was walking right into the trap. I replied with a simple, That's great news, Eleanor. Let me know what you need from me to support the submission. Now for the most critical part of the plan. The Innovator of the Year ceremony included a live demonstration. The winner had to get on stage and showcase their project in front of the entire company, including the CEO. This is where Eleanor had failed before, and this is where she would fail again. But this time the failure would be absolute. I kept working on Nightingale, but with a new, secret goal. I created a parallel version of the final presentation file. On the surface, the two versions looked identical. Same file name, same icon, same file size down to the kilobyte. But underneath, they were completely different. The first version, the clean one, was perfect. The data was immaculate, the macros flawless. This one I saved for myself. The second version, the Trojan horse, was my masterpiece of malicious compliance. It looked the same, but I had rewritten its core programming. The macros now pointed to a corrupted, dummy dataset I had hidden deep on the company's network drive. When the presentation launched, everything would look fine. The title slide would be perfect. But the moment the Run Analysis button was clicked for the live demo, my secret script would execute. It wouldn't just show an error message. That was too simple. Instead, every chart and graph would populate with absurd, nonsensical data. Revenue projections would show negative billions. Customer engagement would plummet to 0. And in the center of the main dashboard, in large, bold, red font, a single message would appear. Critical data, integrity failure. User lacking methodology permissions. It was poetic justice. I was going to use her own arrogant claim that she could run my reports in her sleep to publicly prove that she couldn't even run them while wide awake. As the ceremony approached, Eleanor became more erratic. She was under pressure, and she took her anxiety out on me, micromanaging me with pointless updates and meetings. She was trying to build a paper trail showing her deep involvement, but her escalating toxicity had an unintended side effect. People noticed. My colleagues saw me staying late every night while Eleanor took all the credit. Her attempts to isolate me backfired, creating a quiet wave of sympathy in my favor. My most important ally came from an unexpected place. Ben, a senior engineer from IT, was a quiet, no-nonsense guy who'd been with the company forever. He saw everything. One night, He found me at my desk long after everyone had gone. "Vance giving you trouble again?" he asked. I was hesitant, but I gave him the short version. I told him about the stolen credit and the constant undermining. I showed him a couple of emails from Project Karma. He read them, his expression hardening. "I've seen her do this to others," he said grimly. "She's a piranha in a pantsuit. What are you going to do?" "I have a plan," I said, "but I might need some help. On the night of the ceremony, I need to make sure the presentation on the main stage has absolutely no tech support, no backups. If a file happens to be corrupted, there can't be any way to fix it from the tech booth." A slow grin spread across Ben's face. "Consider it done," he said. "Sometimes the system needs to fail to expose the flaws in the user." He was in. The day before the ceremony, Eleanor called me into her office. "Alex, I need the final presentation file," she said impatiently. "Put it on a USB for me. This has to be perfect." "Of course, Eleanor," I said calmly. "It will be." I went back to my desk, my heart hammering. This was it. I took out 2 identical USB drives. On the first, I copied the Trojan horse file. On the second, I copied the perfect version. I labeled the first one Nightingale_final_ presentation and walked it into her office. "Here you go," I said. She snatched it without looking at me, already dreaming of her acceptance speech. I returned to my desk, took the second USB drive, the clean one, and put it in my pocket. Then I opened my email. I attached the perfect version of the presentation and sent it to my personal email and to Ben with the subject line, "Project Nightingale Final Version for Archive." That timestamp was my ultimate insurance policy. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait. The night of the ceremony was electric. The company had rented a lavish ballroom. I found a seat near the back, my heart beating a frantic rhythm of terror and excitement. Across the room, Ben gave me a subtle nod from the tech booth. Everything was in place. After an endless parade of minor awards, the moment arrived. The CEO, Mr. Henderson, took the stage. And now, he boomed, the Innovator of the Year award. This year, the honor goes to a project that promises to revolutionize our entire business strategy. Project Nightingale, led by the brilliant Eleanor Vance. The room erupted in applause. A spotlight found Eleanor, and she practically floated to the stage. She accepted the heavy glass trophy, held it up, and stepped to the podium. "Thank you," she gushed, her voice thick with fake humility. "I am just so humbled. When I first conceptualized Nightingale, it was just a dream. But through months of my own hard work and strategic vision, we turned that dream into a reality." I felt sick. She didn't even give a token thanks to my team. She took every last drop of credit, spinning a heroic tale of her solitary genius. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. "But enough talk," she said, her smile widening. "Why don't I show you? Let me just run the final projections for you all, live." An assistant had already plugged in her USB drive, and the opening slide looked perfect. Eleanor picked up the remote, her confidence peaking. "As you can see, the interface is incredibly user-friendly," she said, clicking through the intro slides. "But the real magic happens when we run the predictive analysis. Watch this." She moved the cursor over the button labeled Run Live Analysis. She looked out at the audience, at the CEO in the front row, and her smile was blinding. She clicked the button. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the magic began. The beautiful charts on the screen flickered and utterly collapsed. The revenue line nosedived into negative billions. Customer satisfaction flatlined at 0. And then in the center of the screen, the final payload appeared in huge, crimson letters. Critical data integrity failure. User lacking methodology permissions. Asterisk, asterisk. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. The smug smile on Eleanor's face shattered. Pure panic flashed in her eyes. She started clicking the remote frantically, but the error message just stared back at her. a brutal indictment of her fraud. "There seems to be a technical glitch," she stammered into the microphone. "The file must be corrupted. It was working perfectly this afternoon." Mr. Henderson, the CEO, stood up, his face a thundercloud. He walked to the edge of the stage. "Eleanor," he said, his voice dangerously low but audible to the entire silent room. "What exactly is this report supposed to be showing us?" She froze, a deer in the headlights of her own lies. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She had no idea. She didn't know the first thing about the project. Her claim of being able to run the reports in her sleep was being catastrophically debunked in real time. That was my cue. I didn't storm the stage. I didn't shout. I did something much quieter and far more devastating. I stood up from my seat. My hands were shaking, but I held my voice steady. "Mr. Henderson," I called out, cutting through the silence. "Perhaps I can help." Every head in the room turned to me. "It seems there might be a file corruption issue with that version," I continued, walking calmly toward the stage. "I have the original, stable source file right here, if you'd like to see the project's actual results." I reached the stage and held out my own, clean USB drive. As the tech crew scrambled to switch it, Mr. Henderson turned his full attention to me. His eyes narrowed. "You're Alex from Eleanor's team, aren't you?" he asked. "Isn't this your project?" I met his gaze and gave a simple, factual nod. I didn't need to say another word. In that moment, standing next to the stammering, humiliated wreck of a woman who tried to ruin me, everyone in that room, especially the CEO, finally understood the truth. The tech crew, with a little help from a smirking Ben, loaded my file. The screen flickered to life, and this time it was perfect. The real project, Nightingale, appeared. "Walk me through it," Mr. Henderson commanded. And I did. I gave a clear, 2-minute explanation of the project's findings. I knew this thing inside and out, and it showed. When I finished, a ripple of genuine applause went through the audience. They finally saw the value of the project because they were finally hearing it from the person who actually built it. Throughout my explanation, Eleanor just stood there, a ghost on the stage. The color had drained from her face. When I was done, a woman from HR quietly appeared at her side, whispered something, and escorted her off stage through a side exit. Her abandoned trophy glinted mockingly on the podium. The next morning, I was called into a meeting with Mr. Henderson and the head of HR. I was nervous but prepared. I didn't frame my actions as revenge. I framed them as a last-ditch effort to protect a critical company project. I calmly walked them through Project Karma, the emails, the screenshots, the long history of her sabotage documented with undeniable proof. I showed them the time-stamped email I had sent to Ben, proving I had the working file long before the ceremony. By the time I was finished, they didn't see sabotage. They saw a clear pattern of managerial misconduct and intellectual property theft on Eleanor's part, and a necessary act of self-preservation on mine. "You did what you had to do, Alex," Mr. Henderson said, a new respect in his eyes. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention, and for saving the project." 2 days later, a company-wide memo announced that Eleanor Vance was no longer with Viridian Dynamics, effective immediately. The official reason was a misrepresentation of company projects and a gross failure in personnel management. Her downfall was as swift as it was complete. The next week, Mr. Henderson called me to his office. He told me the board was so impressed with Project Nightingale, and with me, that they were creating a new department, the Data Insights and Strategy Group, and they wanted me to lead it. It was basically Eleanor's old role, but with more responsibility and a significant pay raise. My career hadn't just been saved, it had been launched into a new trajectory, when I never could have reached under her shadow. The cloud of toxicity hanging over our team lifted overnight. Looking back, this whole ordeal taught me a powerful lesson. I used to believe that if I just kept my head down and worked hard, my competence would speak for itself. But the world doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you have to fight for your own value. My revenge wasn't just about watching Eleanor fail. It was about the satisfaction of proving my own worth beyond any doubt. It was about refusing to let someone else's toxicity define my career. Eleanor tried to sabotage me because she was threatened by my skill. In the end, that very skill became the instrument of her undoing. She arrogantly claimed she could run my reports in her sleep, but it was her own career that was put into a permanent, deep sleep. It turns out, sometimes karma doesn't need divine intervention. Sometimes all it takes is one really, really bad PowerPoint presentation. If you enjoyed this story of workplace justice, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Situations like this are far more common than people think. So, I have to ask, have you ever seen workplace karma in action? Tell me your stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear them.